Hey guys, welcome back to the arena. This is the Basilisk, joined now by BBP, presumably recovered from the stress of watching his beloved NC Dot fight. So we're here to watch Bright Side of Death against Castabouts. So Castabouts have brought this triple battleship core with the Vindicator, Leshak, Hyperion. They've got an Astarte, and then they've got a small end of Retribution, Vedmak, Vexor with some Logi frigates and a Punisher as well. BBP, do you want to just run through what Bright Side of Death have brought?
Bright Side of Death is bringing a Leshak, a couple battle cruisers and heavy assault cruisers. They're bringing the Executor as a logistics, and they actually have a Kitsune, Sentinel, and Maulus with a really interesting ECM slash control frigate wing there, which is pretty cool. We don't really see that very much here. But it's going to be interesting to see how do they work against Castabouts' team, because while there's something we don't see very much, they're also very, very powerful ships. And you can already see that there are jams and tamps going out onto the Thalia from Castabouts as Bright Side of Death begins applying quite a hefty amount of DPS towards their Deacon.
Yeah, and quite an interesting comp from Bright Side of Death, and as you might expect, Castabouts with their triple battleship comp just running straight in towards Bright Side of Death, and Bright Side of Death not wanting to get caught up in a brawl with a Vindicator, the Leshak Hyperion, trying to back up towards the edge of the arena, as the Retribution of Corp starts taking some damage, but only shield damage for now, as the Leshak of Faffy Waffy having to burn in this, having to tank this damage on his way in.
It's really weird. Like the little frigates from Bright Side of Death are not actually doing very much. They finally realized that they should probably control that Vindicator, so the Vindicator has been stopped dead by the Sacrilege from Bright Side of Death. So at least they're not making that classic mistake of allowing a Vindicator to just run rampant through your team. And Bright Side of Death is going after a Punisher, which is a really interesting choice. I know that he is kind of out of position, but it's also one of the tankiest and most difficult to take down frigates that is not Tech 2. So they're going to be trying to bring him down. They do have newts and a grapple on him, so he's not moving very fast, but he's also surviving pretty incredibly well considering he's actually not receiving any reps.
Yeah, and meanwhile, the Bright Side of Death Sentinel is taking some damage, although he is also holding. This Sacrilege for Bright Side of Death is being used, as we've seen it be used before, as a heavy tackle to keep this Vindicator in place and stop him from burning in and doing whatever he wants to do. And I mean, it may be a matter of time they may switch to the Sacrilege, as they are now switching to the Sacrilege of Fern Scored. They want to take him off the field, get this Vindicator some freedom to roam around the arena and start putting some DPS down like he can if he's unencumbered.
We meme a lot about people going after Sacrileges first, but in this case, if that Vindicator is not untackled by taking the Sacrilege down, or at least outranging it, the Vindicator is going to pretty much be stuck only shooting the Sacrilege. So Castabouts is making a really, really smart call, going after the only valid target right here. At the same time, Brightside is trying to take down a Leshak. They're doing a bit of a decent job of it, but I think their Brightside's having a little bit of trouble getting into position because they're worried about that sphere of influence that the Vindicator creates.
Yeah, definitely, and against this 3 battleship comp, you don't want to be caught up in the middle of them because they are just going to punch you in the face repeatedly and very, very hard, and you are going to die pretty quickly. So they're trying to take a little bit more sort of tempered approach to the match with their more hack and cruiser sort of sized hull composition here with the Demos, the Sacrilege, the Zealot. But I mean, using this Sacrilege to hold down the Vindicator, like we saw a couple of matches ago, you need to make a trade in the meantime, or make some progress on something else on the field, or else eventually the Sacrilege is going to die and you're left with, well, you haven't done anything in that time. So yeah, you need to be doing something in the meantime and making sure you're getting some progress towards your objective of whatever you're trying to primary.
You can see that there's some EC drones actually had Faffy Waffy jammed out for a little bit. Now that he's no longer jammed on Brightside, there's a ton of DPS being applied to that Leshak. So it looked like Brightside was not really doing a lot for a bit. The little EC drones actually jammed out their Leshak, but Faffy Waffy is now smart bombing quite quickly and taking away almost all of the rep bots here. And once again, we're seeing really powerful smart bombs just completely wiping out one of the key ways of winning this, which is with rep sets-ups. At the same time, this Leshak's going to go down, but the Sacrilege probably is already ADCU'd, and I don't know. If you trade a Leshak for Sac, that's never a good trade.
No, and this Sacrilege of Unscored is actually still alive and looking fairly healthy. I would assume he has used his ADCU, but after the Leshak of Robert Smith goes down for Castabouts, that DPS that's coming out of that 3 battleship core may actually not be enough to take down the Sacrilege, and he may in fact be able to get away, although it looks unlikely. He does seem to be in the middle of the Vedmak, but he's got a lot of rep drones on him, so either way it's going to be a bit of a struggle to take him down, especially without the smart bombs that the Leshak almost certainly had fitted.
And the Sentinel of Brightside of Death is doing crazy work keeping this Deacon neuted. Bonus small reps newt so much, and against a frigate, he's probably dead capping him every few seconds here, which is almost impossible to cap boost through. So the Leshak does go down, and I think a lot of it is this little tiny ECM frigate support wing just preventing the reps from castabouts from being effective. They're either jammed or they're completely neuted out the entire time.
Yeah, it's really interesting how we've seen the meta evolve throughout the tournament, because I don't think we saw any of these sort of evil frigates like the Sentinel in the first week, or we saw very, very few. But now a fair number of teams are starting to they're realizing the benefits of bringing this 5-point Sentinel and or Crucifier, as we've seen a couple of times as well, and just being left to do your own thing, get on top of the enemy support wing, get on top of the enemy logi frigates, and just cap them out and severely cripple what they can do.
I think Castabouts has finally realized that going after the Sacrilege is maybe not the best idea, and they're putting all of their damage into the Leshak now, which is a much easier target to take down, weirdly enough, even though you think battleships are generally tankier just because of the Leshak's resistances, but they're going to lose their Vindicator beforehand, and I think at that point they're going to have a lot of trouble taking anything down, and Castabouts really need to clear the Sentinel off, but he's probably AB fit, and I believe he's just flying around and he's got great positioning. He's never being tackled. Like, they've had him scram the entire time, but that doesn't really matter. And the Vindicator goes down. Leshak's only at about 50 to 60% HP, and I think he's going to be able to hold because Castabouts just has the Hyperion and the Astarte left as actual DPS.
Yeah, it's a reasonably good focus from Brightside of Death. They've looked at the enemy comp, they said, okay, they've got all their damage in those 3 battleships, let's just wipe those off the field, and there's not much they can really do after that. And, they've thrown the Sacrilege in there to say, okay, you can deal with this and, try and take him down while we do our thing, but unable to take that Sacrilege down, unable to make any progress, of course, he just reps back up under the reduced DPS after the Vindicator and Leshak are gone. And, it from the table of health bars, it looks like castabouts have made very little progress at all. I mean, they may or may not have come pretty close to killing that Sacrilege, but once they lose that Vindicator and Leshak, it just gets, all the progress they made just gets undone.
The Astarte is going down pretty quickly as well, and I'm wondering if they had it maybe a little bait tanky. Sometimes people do command ships with not a particularly large amount of tank just because they're tanky by themselves, and that's going to go down quite quickly here, which means Castabout has lost about, I'd say probably half of their potential DPS. Well, they still have a Vedmak, which is pretty good, but this Hyperion's been controlled so well. He's been jammed, he's neuted, he's tracking disrupted, threw a couple paints on him just for add a little bit of insult to injury. And again, this Deacon's been neuted the entire time by this Sentinel, who's just sitting there making it so that one of the Castabouts logistics frigates is doing nothing, and Brightside of Death is making a really smart call here, recognizing that because their control has both logistics frigates shut down either from jams or newts, they can just go through and clear out the entire DPS core. If your logistics aren't able to rep, there's no reason to even shoot them.
Yeah, it's a good point. But I just want to bring your attention to the bans. So Castabouts banned Augur or Guardian or Neros. They really didn't want to see the armor logi, and then Brightside of Death just brought the Executor anyway. Do you think those are a good 3 bans, or do you think they should have switched up and brought something else a little bit more focused to taking out specific ships?
The Guardian and the Oneros are pretty good bans, but the thing is that Executors are better than Augurs, pretty much, just because they have a little bit more mid slots, and Augurs are sort of balanced on TQ around being able to remote cap transfer. So if you really don't want to see armor logi that bad, you really have to get rid of the Executor as well. Hyperion does go down, and I think Castabouts was a little scared to maybe go for banning out one of the logistics frigates, because it seems that, like, while they did not want to see armor logi, they also chose to bring an armor ship setup. And Castabouts has been doing really good. I think we were talking, one of their team captains is a relatively experienced tourney pilot, but the thing is that Brightside of Death, like, yeah, they haven't flown under this name before, but Faffy Waffy is considered to be one of the old school AT team captains. Maybe not necessarily like as famous as someone like DHB, who, he's not the actual NC team captain, but he does provide a lot, with Ajax being the team captain for them. But it's not quite the same level, but having years and years of experience allows them to make these really interesting calls and make these out-of-the-box setups with things like, again, EC frigates. Like, who brings those?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting quirk, and I'm personally glad to see it win. I mean, I like when people bring new things and it works out well for them. So yeah, Brightside of Death now just cleaning up the arena, getting rid of the rest of this Castabout support wing. Once again, just a reminder that this is the winners bracket, so Castabouts, this is not the last we'll see of them. They're going to go down to the losers bracket, but this is the last winners bracket match of the day. So I believe every match after this, the losers will be going home.
Yeah, well, it's, Castabouts is still in. They'll still get to do a lot of stuff. And they still have an opportunity to go quite far in the lower bracket, though. The lower bracket is getting filled with more and more extremely scary teams. With Volta's been down there for a while. PL's no longer there, but there's a lot of other ones. I think Tuskers is now down there, which is they did incredibly well versus Hydra, even though they didn't win. So it's going to get really, really scary. But CASTABOUTS still has a chance to at least maybe take a couple more games. And, like we've said, lower bracket is where the winners have come in most Alliance tournaments. So maybe they'll still be this crazy, awesome upset. Right now, Bright Side of Death, they're finishing off the Retribution. He's doing his best to kite away. So it might be a little bit of time, as Retributions are very, very tanky ships. But CASTABOUTS has absolutely no chance of winning this at this point, unless the entire Bright Side of Death team decides to go boundary violate.
Yep, somehow I see that unlikely, and with just 15 seconds left on the clock, whether the Retribution dies or not will almost certainly be entirely irrelevant, as Bright Side of Death are going to win either 95-0 or 100-0.
Yeah, it's kind of just a race of whether or not they can get the perfect, and they actually do take him down with 2 seconds or 3 seconds remaining in the match, so Bright Side of Death will be staying in the winner's bracket. CASTABOUTS is moving on down to the lower bracket, and with that, we're going to head back to the studio.